Linda stood on the porch of the farmhouse, waving a probate court order like a royal decree. She thought the judge's signature gave her the right to the $1.85 million estate. She thought the eviction notice she taped to my workshop door was the end of the conversation. She didn't know that I had spent the last 3 weeks building a paper trail so dense it would suffocate her legal team. She screamed at the deputy to remove me for trespassing. I didn't raise my voice. I simply handed the officer a certified copy of a quitclaim deed filed in 2008. "Officer," I said, "she's trying to evict me from a property I've owned for 15 years. And since she just listed it for sale, I'd like to file a report for attempted mortgage fraud." But to understand how Linda went from the grieving widow to a defendant in a felony fraud case, we have to rewind 21 days. I don't deal in feelings, I deal in property lines. I'm a licensed land surveyor. My job is to determine exactly where one person's rights end and another's begin. It's a profession that requires absolute precision. 1 inch of error can cost a developer millions. My father was a pragmatist. He bought the 40-acre homestead 40 years ago. When he married Linda 4 years ago, I didn't object. He was lonely, she was younger, attractive, and had a taste for the finer things. I ran my business out of the converted barn on the South Acre. We coexisted. But Linda wasn't interested in coexistence. She was interested in liquidation. When Dad flatlined in the ICU, she didn't call me. I found out from the night nurse. By the time I arrived at the house the next morning, the locks were already changed. Grief makes some people irrational. It made Linda predatory. First, the slight. The morning of the funeral, Linda informed me that the service was private, family only. She claimed my presence would be distracting. I stood at the back of the cemetery, 200 yards away, watching her cry into a handkerchief that cost more than my first car. Then the theft. 3 days later, I saw Dad's 1967 Mustang Fastback being loaded onto a flatbed. That car wasn't just a vehicle. It was a $65,000 asset. She sold it for cash, likely to avoid the probate inventory. She was stripping the estate before the body was cold. Finally, the catalyst. Then came the letter. Not a text, not a call. A formal notice from her lawyer. Notice to vacate. You have 72 hours to remove your personal property and business equipment from the premises. Failure to comply will result in law enforcement intervention. She wasn't just kicking me out. She was dismantling my livelihood. Most men would have stormed the main house. They would have shouted, made threats, and given her exactly what she wanted, a reason to get a restraining order. I did nothing. I packed my total stations, my tripods, and my servers. I loaded my truck. When Linda came out to gloat, holding a glass of Pinot Grigio at 10 a.m., she smiled. "It's for the best," she said. "I need to sell the land to secure my future. You understand." "I understand perfectly, Linda," I said. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I drove away. She thought she had won. She thought silence was submission. She didn't realize I wasn't going to a motel. I was going to the county clerk's office of records. Linda had a lawyer, a strip mall generalist who probably handled more DUIs than estate planning. He had filed for probate, assuming Dad died intestate, without a will, which would make Linda the primary beneficiary of the community property. But they hadn't done a forensic audit of the property title. I had. I pulled the file from 2008. Dad was terrified of the government taking the farm for nursing home costs. So, 17 years ago, we executed a specific legal maneuver. He signed a quitclaim deed, transferring the title of the entire 40 acres directly to me. In exchange, I granted him a life estate. The clause was clear. Grantor reserves unto himself a life estate for the duration of his natural life, upon which time full possession and fee simple title shall vest immediately in the grantee. Translation: Dad owned the right to live there until he died. I owned the dirt. The moment his heart stopped, his interest in the property evaporated. It never entered the estate. It wasn't Linda's to sell. It wasn't even hers to live in. I could have stopped her immediately. But vengeance is best served with a side of financial ruin. I needed her to commit to the fraud. I waited 3 weeks. I watched as she hired a contractor to repaint the house, using money she likely pulled from Dad's savings. That was $12,000 she would never see again. I watched as she listed the property with a high-end real estate agent. Asking price, $1.85 million. I watched as she accepted an offer. She signed a sales contract. In that document, she signed an affidavit stating she had the legal authority to sell the property. That was the trigger. She hadn't just made a mistake. By signing that contract and accepting an earnest money deposit, she had committed perjury and attempted real estate fraud. I prepared my own document, a notice of cloud on title, and then I called the sheriff. We are back on the porch. The sheriff is reading the quitclaim deed. He looks at the date. He looks at Linda's probate order. "Ma'am," the deputy said, his voice dropping an octave, "this deed is dated 2008. It's registered with the county. According to this, your husband didn't own this house when he died. This gentleman did." Linda turned pale. "That's a fake, my lawyer said." "Your lawyer checked the current tax records, which still listed Dad as the life tenant," I cut in. "He didn't check the chain of title." I turned to the deputy. "She has signed a sales contract for this property. She has taken a $20,000 earnest money deposit. That is theft by deception." I looked at Linda. "You have 20 minutes to vacate my property. If you're not off the land, I'm pressing charges for trespassing. And Linda, the contractors you hired, I'm not paying them. That's a personal debt you incurred." The realization hit her like a physical blow. The house wasn't hers. The land wasn't hers. The sale was void. Linda left with 3 suitcases and a bewildered cat, but the damage was mathematical and severe. The renovation costs, $12,000 sunk into a house she didn't own. The realtor breach. The buyer sued her for the return of the deposit plus damages for the delay. The legal fees. Her lawyer dropped her when he realized she had lied about the assets. The Mustang. I filed a civil suit for the value of the car, $65,000, claiming tortious interference with inheritance. I won. A lien was placed on her personal bank account. She wanted to be a millionaire widow. She ended up living in a rented condo, servicing a debt she could never repay. Possession isn't 9/10 of the law. Documentation is. Always read the deed before you dig the grave. This is The Archivist. Case closed.